Hey guys, welcome to episode 3 of the Destroy Android shooter app that we've been working on. In this episode, we are going to be creating our little enemy Android guys who are going to be falling from the top of the screen to try to destroy us. So that's going to require two things. We're going to need to create a subclass of the image sprite so that we can deal with things like collision for our Android sprites and everything. And it's also going to require us to create a new game clock, just like we did in Mole Mash. And this is going to help animate the Android guy fall down the screen at us. So down at the bottom here, I'm going to start by creating a subclass of the image sprite. And I'm just going to call it our Android sprite. And it's going to extend image sprite. And have it auto-generate our constructor for us. And for now, that's all we're going to do. We're going to implement a few other methods later on. But we just wanted to be able to do this so that we can create our Android objects. The main part is going to be our game clock. And so just like we did in our Mole Mash, we're going to create a subclass of clock. So I'm going to create another inner class called game clock. I'm just going to extend clock. Make sure to import it, and then we can go ahead and override our timer method. And if you remember from last time, if you click inside of this class and you right click, go to source, override, and implement methods, you can see all of the methods that we have as a clock subclass. So the timer one doesn't show up because I've already added it manually. So the timer is going to be pretty straightforward. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new Android image sprite for every tick that happens in this clock. We're going to set the picture, how fast it's going to be moving, and then we're going to randomly position it on the x-axis. So now that we have our Android sprite class done, we can create our new new objects. So I'm going to create this new Android sprite, and similar to what we did in the Mole Mash tutorial, we want to make sure we're adding this sprite to our game canvas and not to our form object. So I'm going to pass in my game canvas, which I call game canvas, conveniently. Okay, and so now we want to set its picture. Now I have this picture that I found online of a little Android guy. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. And make sure it's in your assets folder, by the way. Okay. Now, a few other things we need to do. If we look at the Java doc for image sprite, we can see all of the different methods that we can use. So, one that we're going to be using is interval. So we can set the timer interval in milliseconds. We're going to set the speed, which, because we want this Android guy falling from the top down, we need to set a speed. And we want to set our heading to around -90 degrees. And that should actually do it. So let's go ahead and set our interval, and I'm going to put it at 45. And a lot of these values were just kind of mess around with them, see which one works for your application. It depends kind of what you're doing and also what devices you're running. These values I figured out just by playing with them. I'm going to set its speed to 25. Like I said, I'm going to set its heading to be -90. And I don't want this sprite to rotate. I want them to fall pretty naturally from the top. So I'm going to say false for rotating. And then I'm going to initialize it. Now for the last part is we want to give it some initial value. So the Android guy is only going to be falling across the y-axis. But we don't want all of the Androids falling on the exact same path. So we're going to give it some random x coordinate. So we did this in the mole mash tutorial as well, but basically you're going to create some new random object. Don't forget to import it. And then I'm going to create some random x coordinate. So I'm going to get next int. And if you remember from the mole mash tutorial, what we had to do was we had to take the game canvas and we needed to subtract off the width of the image sprite. And this is so that the second half of the Android sprite doesn't get cut off by the end of the screen. So I'm going to take the Android guy's width and subtract it off from the canvas. Then all we have to do is move the Android guy to that position. And so there's a nice move to. And we're going to use random x. And for y, the top of the screen is y equals 0. So for the y, I'm just going to put 0. All right. And so now our game clock is fine. It's going to create a new Android object for every single tick because we don't want just one at a time, right? But one thing we need to do is in our image sprite class, when the Android guy does get to the bottom of the screen, we want to get rid of him. We don't want to waste up all this memory, so we're going to actually delete the component from the game canvas. To do that, if I click in here and I right click and go to source, implement methods, and if I go down to sprite component, there's this edge reached method. So I'm going to go ahead and check that, click OK. Now what this does is this tells me when the sprite has reached the edge of the screen. It'll actually call this method for you internally. So all I want to do is when that edge is reached, I want to delete the component. Now going back to the Java doc, the form class has this method called delete component. And this is simply going to remove the Android from our application. So I'm just going to go ahead and say delete component. And because this is the Android sprite class, I'm going to pass in this. Okay, and let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Oh, actually, one other thing we need to do is we need to actually create our game clock object. So going back up here, I'm going to create a new private variable, and I'm just going to call it game clock. And then in my define method, I'm going to instantiate it to be a new game clock object. And I'm going to make sure I enable the timer. Or timer enabled to be true. And I want to set off or set the value for how often this clock fires off. And I'm just going to set it to 750. And this number is the number of milliseconds. So this is going to fire off almost every second. Oh, it's complaining that I didn't actually implement the constructor. So I'm going to go ahead and go to source. I'm going to override and implement methods. Or sorry, for the constructor, I'm actually going to go to source and then generate constructors from superclass. I only need the bottom one. There we go. Now it's all better. So now if I run the program, hopefully we'll see Android guys falling from the screen. Okay, as we can see, the Android guys are falling from the top of the screen at random positions, and when they get to the bottom, they disappear, thanks to that edge reach method. It looks a little laggy, but that's mainly because I'm recording this at 1080p, and that's kind of killing my computer right now. Anyway, so that's all there is for this episode. For the next episode, what we're going to do is we are going to get our ship to shoot apples whenever the user touches the screen. So I'll see you then.